My father didn't clear his throat or soften the blow. He simply slid a glossy binder across the dining table, tapped it once, and said my sister's name like it was a blessing handed down from heaven. Mila had been back in Portland for barely 5 days. I'd held that house and my parents together for a decade. My mother's quiet nod felt louder than a slammed door. I didn't protest. I didn't even flinch. I set the financial access card beside the townhouse keys, the metal clinking so sharply it made my father blink. They assumed I was giving up, but when Mila opened the envelope I'd left addressed to her, she didn't read past the first line. She couldn't. I grew up wandering long corridors that smelled of disinfectant and pine-scented floor polish, the assisted living facility where my parents worked becoming my after-school world. My father strode ahead of me with purpose, greeting residents like a politician warming up for a campaign. I followed behind, pushing wheelchairs I was too small for, standing on my toes just to keep them steady. "Steady, Ari," he'd murmur, eyes already drifting back to whichever staff member he wanted to impress. Mila never followed anyone. She drifted effortless, admired, camera-ready. Her dresses twirled, her hair gleamed, and her laughter drew attention like a magnet. My mother framed her in hallways, in gardens, beside Christmas trees, posting captions about the daughter destined for greatness. I appeared in the background of those photos half-cut, holding schedules or cleaning up unnoticed messes. Even as kids, the script was fixed. Mila got dance intensives, music camps, weekend beach trips to nurture her creativity. I got duty. Ariana's the strong one, my parents told everyone, as if strength were a gift and not a requirement. I learned early that needing anything made me inconvenient. So I stopped wanting. I stocked medication carts, refilled glucose meters, folded laundry still warm from the dryer. I helped residents finish birthday cards and wrote their messages when their hands shook too much to manage a pen. I became the daughter who fixed everything quietly, the one whose reliability replaced the need for recognition. By the time I entered my mid-20s, the pattern had calcified. Mila moved to Seattle to find herself in digital branding, a dream my parents spoke of like scripture. When she called home, it was usually for rent money. They always wired it without hesitation. Meanwhile, my father's heart condition worsened. My mother's arthritis flared. The assisted living facility our family's livelihood struggled. Staff turnover spiked. State regulations tightened, and the daughter they leaned on wasn't the one they'd celebrated. It was me. I signed the power of attorney papers on a hard plastic hospital chair at 2 a.m. My mother whispering, "You handle the serious things, Ari." It wasn't praise. It was confirmation of the role I never asked for. Some nights after 12-hour shifts, I'd catch my reflection in the facility's glass entrance, upright posture, hair pinned back, tablet under my arm. I didn't look 20-something. I looked like someone who had already lived 2 lives. That was when I understood. Mila was the face. I was the framework. The shift came slowly, like fog rolling in before anyone notices the sky is gone. First, a state compliance email I normally handled arrived without my name. Then a staffing audit thread. Then a meeting about succession planning I only learned about because a nurse asked why I wasn't presenting the monthly report. I was standing in the supply room, cold air humming, when my phone buzzed a photo from my mother. Mila in front of the facility sign, smiling like she'd already inherited it. Caption, "Future Leadership." Seconds later, an invitation graphic, family legacy ceremony. Gold lettering, date and venue. No mention of me. That night I walked into my parents' kitchen, the air warm with roasted peppers. Richard stood beside Mila, speaking softly about vision and modernizing the next decade. Colleen nodded along, glowing with pride. I waited for one of them to look at me, to acknowledge I was standing there. They didn't. When my father finally lifted his eyes, he offered a distracted smile. "Ariana, don't worry about the administrative load right now. You've carried enough. It's time for Mila to take on bigger responsibilities." That word "bigger" hung in the air like a verdict. Mila stood beside him with her arms loosely crossed, wearing a practiced smile, the kind people wear when they know the spotlight is already theirs. She looked less like someone preparing to manage an assisted living facility and more like someone preparing for a brand launch. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. My grip tightened on the edge of my tablet. My mother reached out and touched my wrist gently. "You're so good with behind-the-scenes work," she said softly. "Let her shine." Behind the scenes. The phrase landed heavier than any accusation. Later that night, I found another folder on the dining table, financial projections written in Mila's handwriting. The math was wrong. The timelines impossible. The budgets detached from reality. Yet my parents' initials sat neatly in the corner. Their decision had been made long before I walked into the kitchen. I sat down, the chair legs scraping against the hardwood. My breath came steady, thin but controlled. I looked through each page, and something inside me settled. Not shattered. Settled. I didn't argue. I didn't correct the figures. I didn't remind them who kept the facility alive through 10 years of crises. I simply closed the folder, aligned it perfectly with the table's edge, and went upstairs. Each step felt weightless, as if gravity had loosened its hold. In my room, I sat on the bed, light blue walls still unchanged from childhood, familiar but indifferent. The house was quiet except for Mila's laugh drifting up the stairs, bright and victorious. I opened a blank document on my tablet. No title, no emotion, just space. Then I began. First, a 10-year timeline. Medical emergencies, compliance deadlines, staffing implosions. The year Medicaid funding nearly vanished. Every disaster I navigated alone. Second, structural data. Licenses, compliance standards, vendors, hospital partnerships, and a list of every person who depended on the system, not the building, to survive. The state inspectors who trusted my monthly reports. The physicians who approved our care pathways because they knew I never inflated results. The caseworkers who called me not Richard and not Colleen when a family panicked at midnight. I didn't have to build a case. The case already existed. All I had to do was arrange the truth in the right order. The next morning, before the sun had even lifted over Portland, I drove through the quiet streets, fog still clinging to the sidewalks. I parked outside Dr. Ellison's office, the facility's longtime medical director. His lights were already on, a kettle steaming in the window. When he opened the door, he didn't ask why I'd come. He simply stepped aside in that steady way people do when they've been expecting something to break for a long time. His office smelled of cedar and old medical journals, a place where truth didn't need a stage. I placed my notes on his desk. He read in silence, glasses slipping toward the tip of his nose, turning each page with the kind of precision meant to measure impact, not sentences. When he finished, he leaned back. "They're moving without you," he said. I nodded. "And you're done asking to be acknowledged?" Another nod. He tapped the corner of my timeline. "You don't need revenge, Ariana. You need structure. And instay." By afternoon, he'd connected me with Marianne Rowan, a legal consultant who'd spent decades safeguarding healthcare systems from people who didn't understand the difference between property and function. She reviewed everything: compliance logs, my power of attorney paperwork, operational manuals I'd built from scratch. Her mouth tightened only when she reached the projections Mila had drafted. "They're planning a transfer," she said, "but they have no idea what they're transferring." "I can't set in." "Explain it," I told her. She pointed first at the licensing documents. "This is the spine. Without it, the building is just walls. Then the care protocols. Intellectual property. You created it. Finally, the partnership summaries. This is institutional capital. It follows competence, not a last name." I sat very still. "You can protect your work," she said. "Not with emotion. With boundaries." And never. We spent the next week constructing a legal framework. A non-profit foundation meant to hold everything: intangible protocols, branding, data, architecture, partnerships, not to possess, but to safeguard. I named it quietly, Harbor Bridge Foundation. A bridge for the people who needed steadiness because my family had never offered any. If you're still with me, make sure you subscribe. The next part of this story isn't just a twist. It's the moment everything finally snaps into place. I under my authority still fully valid, never revoked, I executed each transfer with the precision of someone double-checking medication dosages. Every signature, every notarization, every filing routed exactly where it belonged. Richard and Colleen, believing they were completing routine administrative updates to secure their health and the business, signed honorary advisory appointments without reading the finer lines. No ownership. No managerial rights. Just ceremonial recognition of their last name. When everything was finalized, I returned to daily operations as though nothing had shifted beneath the surface. I moved through hallways, reviewed charts, updated schedules. Staff greeted me with the quiet respect reserved for the person who had kept them standing through the darkest years. Meanwhile, Mila floated through rooms with a notebook and a serene smile, suggesting pastel color palettes for the website redesign. My parents lit up every time she spoke. The night before the legacy ceremony, I sat alone in the small office tucked behind the nurse's station. Fluorescent lights hummed. My tablet displayed one last document, a letter addressed to Mila. It wasn't bitter. It wasn't defensive. It was clarity clean, steady, inevitable. I wrote about what she believed she was stepping into. A title without a structure, a legacy without the engine behind it. I explained the foundation not to shame her, but to prepare her for the truth Richard and Colleen refused to acknowledge. I ended with one sentence that felt like stepping into my own name. What you carry next depends on what you choose to hold. I printed it, folded it into a red envelope bright enough to be noticed without demanding attention. On the morning of the celebration, I slipped it into my bag beside my keys and the POA documents. 3 items, 3 truths. This time, I wouldn't repair what they broke. This time, the system would reveal itself. From the doorway, the celebration glowed soft lights, crystal glasses, linen napkins folded with ceremonial care. My parents stood at the center, vibrant in a way I hadn't seen in years. Mila sat between them, posed and polished. When Richard tapped his spoon against a plate, the room quieted. Thank you all for being here. Tonight, we honor the future of our family's work. He turned toward Mila. She's ready to lead. Colleen nodded, pride softening her face. She deserves it. The words didn't hurt. They simply confirmed what had always been known. When the applause faded, I rose. Not abruptly, not aggressively, just enough for the room to breathe differently. Then I placed 3 items on the table before me. If you're still with me, make sure you subscribe. The next part of this story isn't just a twist, it's the moment everything finally snaps into place. Is Tactivis undersode? The keys, the power of attorney file, and the red envelope rested in front of me. The keys made the smallest sound, a clean metallic tap that sliced through the room's warmth. Richard's expression tightened. Ariana, this isn't necessary. I slid the keys gently toward Mila. It's all yours. Some guests smiled, assuming it was symbolic. Others sensed the shift, the wrong kind of quiet. Mila reached for the envelope first. Her fingers traced its edge before she pulled out the letter, unfolding it carefully. Her eyes skimmed the first lines. Then narrowed. Then sharpened. She turned the page. Then another. Her breath hitched. What is this? She whispered. Silence answered her. She kept reading, her hands tightening, knuckles paling against the paper. No. No, this can't be real. Her voice cracked, disbelief slicing through each word. You're kidding. Her chair screeched backward as she stood. Gasps rippled around the table. Richard snatched the papers from her. His face drained as he reached the section outlining the brand protocols, operational authority, the licensing and compliance structures, everything filed under Harbor Bridge Foundation. His fingers trembled. Ariana. What did you do? I didn't speak. Colleen grabbed a page, scanning it in frantic bursts. This says we don't own any of this. That? I said softly. Those facilities are just buildings. Nothing more. A hush fell. Even the silverware seemed to freeze. In the corner, Mr. Hayes, the Harbor Bridge attorney, rose. He had blended into the crowd until the moment truth required him. Everything in that packet is accurate, he said calmly. The transfers were executed 3 years ago, during the period when Miss Ariana Hale held full legal authority on behalf of her parents. Richard's voice broke. Without our consent? With your signatures? Hayes replied gently. You approved each document. We have medical verification and third-party oversight confirming necessity. Mila stared at him, breath unsteady. So, what did they just give me? Hayes folded his hands. 2 aging properties and the debt attached to them. Anything more requires certification from Harbor Bridge certification contingent upon meeting the care standards Miss Hale designed. Colleen shook her head desperately. She can learn. She can meet them. Hayes lifted a single page. Not without this. If staffing ratios fall, if safety protocols slip, if any core process deviates, Harbor Bridge can revoke the license within 60 days, Hayes said, lifting the page. Without a license, the buildings cannot operate. Richard's voice thinned to a whisper. So, we have nothing. I didn't correct him. They had exactly what they valued. Appearance without structure. Mila eased back into her chair, the letter limp in her hands. The confidence she'd worn all night faded. I thought I was taking over something real, she murmured. You were, I said softly. The responsibility. The system. You just never saw it. Hayes closed the folder. This protects the seniors and the staff. It isn't punishment. It's necessary. My parents stared at me not as the daughter who carried them for years, but as someone who had finally stepped out of their grasp. I offered no comfort, no raised voice. I simply stepped away, the room falling silent behind me. I didn't sleep that night, not from guilt, but from the unfamiliar quiet. My phone stayed dark. No late calls, no emergencies, no expectations. The silence felt like walking into a room I never knew existed. By morning, consequences had already begun. Bank alerts, staffing shifts, compliance flags, they all went exactly where responsibility now belonged. Not to me. Still, before sunrise, I drove to the Harbor Bridge Center. The windows glowed amber in the early light. Inside, volunteers prepared for the day. Someone tuned the piano, soft notes floating through the hallways like a reminder that life continued. In my office, a small space warmed by morning light, I set down my keys and exhaled, feeling the weight leave me for good. Later that week, I saw Richard and Colleen in a Medicaid waiting room, hands clasped, eyes hollow. They didn't see me. I didn't stop. There was nothing left to fix. A month later, during a site visit, I spotted Mila in an allied facility pushing a resident's wheelchair. She moved carefully, quietly. She didn't look up. I let her keep the moment. Some stories end with triumph. Mine ended with space quiet earned. For the first time, I wasn't carrying anything that wasn't mine. No shouting. No final reckoning. Just a clean boundary settling into place, soft, inevitable. Freedom didn't come from fighting. It came from stepping aside without looking back. If this story stayed with you, stay close, more are coming. If my story resonated with you, I'd love for you to stand with me. Comment below what you would have done in my place, and let me know I wasn't wrong for choosing peace. And if you've ever had to walk away from carrying too much, tell me your lesson. I hope my journey reminds you to protect your boundaries and your worth. Subscribe so we can walk into these next chapters together.